Welcome. We are looking at an annotation together today. And the passage that we're going to look at is from The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. And I have at the top of this page a specific question and a more general question. So sometimes when you annotate a passage, you might get a question like, what is Esperanza's opinion of her family's new home? And that gives you a really clear focus for what you would want to annotate for. If you don't have a question like that, you want to assume that your question is more like the one right underneath that. What is the central idea of this passage? So if you're ever asked to do an annotation and there's no specific question, you're annotating to find the central idea. Um, and my first step whenever I annotate is always going to be to read the passage and try to get a sense of either the answer to the question, if there's a specific question, or get a sense of the central idea, because then I'll know better what I want to be looking for when I go more specifically into my language analysis. So I'm just going to read this passage quickly to try to get a sense of the answer to the question. But the house on Mango Street is not the way they told it at all. It's small and red with tight steps in front and windows so small you'd think they were holding their breath. Bricks are crumbling in places, and the front door is so swollen you have to push hard to get in. There's no front yard, only 4 little elms the city planted by the curb. So I can get a sense just from reading that Esperanza is disappointed in this house. And so when I go in to annotate and look at language more specifically, I'll be looking to identify the specific pieces of language that help to show that she was disappointed in the house. Here's the annotated passage. And I've numbered my notes just so you can follow the order in which I'm going through them. So the first note that I took on here next to number 1 in purple was that I noticed repetition. I love repetition as a device because it is really easy to find. You just have to look for a significant word that appears multiple times. And then it's also really easy to analyze because repetition just emphasizes whatever word is repeated. So the word small is in there twice, describing different parts of the house. And so the arrow off of repetition shows what I thought was significant about that is Esperanza is disappointed that the house is small. Pretty simple analysis, right? If you look to the left at number 2, this one gets a little more complex. So what I've noticed and circled here is the phrase windows so small you'd think they were holding their breath. And I noticed 2 language things that I noted off of that. So one was that windows symbolize freedom in general. And so I'll want to be thinking about what it means that this house is really small windows. And then the other half of that line is personification. The windows are so small you'd think they were holding their breath. People hold their breath, windows don't, which is why it's personification. So then off of my personification note, I was trying to figure out what the significance was of windows holding their breath. So I thought that holding one's breath has 2 potential connotations. One can be a lack of freedom. You're not breathing freely, right? You're holding things in. And then the other can be waiting for something. And so looking at windows symbolizing freedom, but the windows being small, and the personification with the windows holding their breath, the significance that I took out of that was that Esperanza doesn't feel free here. She's waiting for a better house. Then if you go over to the right, my third note I got from the words tight and swollen I connected because I thought that both of those had connotations of being uncomfortable or a tight fit. I didn't label a device there. I could have called it connotation. I could have called it imagery, but it's also fine just to write what I did, what I associate those words with. And my significance that I got from that was that Esperanza doesn't feel comfortable or like she fits here. My last note is at the bottom, number 4, contrast. And I saw here a contrast between the front yard, which Esperanza wanted, and the reality, which was only 4 little elms. And the significance there was that Esperanza's expectations don't match reality. She doesn't like the house. So if you look at my significance off of this passage, all of the notes that I highlighted in yellow, you'll see that those all help me to answer that question at the top. So if I've been staying focused in my annotation and thinking about meaning and what matters, I should have a pretty good answer to that question in my significance notes. And then I have, since I've looked at lots of examples of specific language, I also have really good evidence to support my interpretation of my answer to the question. So that's annotation. Thanks for listening.